One of the most important things is that you have the financial ability and discipline to pay off your bills in full each and every month. And so if that's something that you struggle with, this again might not be the right strategy for you. I have a friend, I was talking with him about it, and he's like, "Yeah, this would kill me." He's like, "I'm the type of person that the credit card companies want to have credit cards, because he knows that he's just not disciplined enough to kind of to keep track of everything."
Welcome to the Teacher Money Show, the podcast dedicated to helping teachers navigate your unique financial challenges and unlock your financial superpowers. I'm your host, Sean Morgan, a full-time educator and personal financial coach and speaker. But I'm here to help every teacher, whether you're a seasoned teacher looking for fresh insights or a new educator navigating your first paycheck, to have a richer wallet, classroom, and life. I am super excited to have the Dan Miller on my show today. I have known Dan for a number of years. We met at FinCon, and Dan is a travel blogger, specifically family travel blogger, and he blogs at Points with a Crew, and he just gets to talk all about travel. He loves traveling. He's actually trying to go visit every county in the United States right now, which is a huge goal. So he loves travel, obviously, and he has 6 kids, which means that it's expensive usually to travel with that many people. So like obviously he needs to figure this whole system out of how to travel inexpensively with that many people. And we're super excited to have Dan on the show all the way from Cincinnati. So Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sean. Welcome. I'm glad to be here.
So for all of you that are paying attention here, no, Dan is not a teacher, but we're going to look past that because Dan has a very important skill set that I personally want to know more about, which is this whole concept of travel hacking. Now, I just taught travel hacking as like an overall concept in my personal finance class, just like talk about like, credit cards have downsides, but there's also benefits people like, and that's why people use them. And when I said credit card hacking, as like, the term, I had a student say like, wait, like you're like breaking into credit cards and stealing? They're like, no, that's not what this means. So for those who think that travel hacking might sound scammy or maybe it's too complicated, what's the just basic definition of what we're talking about here?
Sure. As you said, it's not anything to do with like hacking into people's credit cards or anything like that. I mean, there's probably a number of different definitions of it. Simply put, it's using credit card rewards and the perks that come with some credit cards to help defray some of your costs of travel. I think a lot of people focus a lot on the sign-up bonuses that come with a credit card. So if you sign up for a new, American Airlines card or Hilton card, you might get 80,000 or 100,000 points just for signing up and meeting, some minimum spending requirements. And so it's using those points, as well as any other points that you might earn from just using your card to help defray some of the costs of travel.
Yeah, so we're just talking about the rewards that are built in. Credit card companies know about these rewards. They know about travel hacking and they're still offering these rewards, and we're just using those to defray those costs.
Yeah.
So how do these points or miles actually work? Because, this whole system of using miles and points is actually to pull it away from money. So that way you're not thinking about the money and the cost and all that stuff. That's part of the reason why they do it. But uh, what does it mean to like to have points? What's a simple way to like
Yeah, sure.
understand that?
So there's a couple of different kinds of points. Some points specifically are worth a fixed amount. So think of like a good example might be like a cashback card. Like a 2% cashback card that gives you 2% cash back on all your purchases. So every purchase you make, a $100 purchase, you get $2 back in rewards. And so those points are specifically worth a fixed amount, often 1 cent per point, though it varies. But there are also other points and miles that don't actually they're not specifically tied to the cash amount of something, and that's where you can get a lot of benefit. So, for example, American Airlines miles. I've had really good luck with that, flying my son to and from college. Um, there's definitely situations where I might like the cash cost of a ticket might be $400 to fly him because he goes to school in Utah, fairly far away from my home in Ohio. So it might be $400, but American Airlines is also offering that same flight for only 7,000 American Airlines miles. And so in that case, those miles are worth, 3, 4, 5 cents each. You can really get outsized value compared to just paying cash for them. And it's kind of finding those situations and kind of maybe using some of the those secrets, of where to use your miles and points that can really help you get like outsized value.
So you talked about getting those points with sign up bonuses. What are like, is that like really what people are shooting for, or is this just like your regular day in and day out? Like how does that work?
So it kind of depends on maybe your interest. Like, how interested are you in credit cards and like really maximizing things? Some people go all in on this kind of stuff and they're signing up for lots of credit cards, getting lots of sign up bonuses. That's how I work. I was an extreme couponer, way back in the days before the shows were on TLC. And so I love that kind of tickles an itch, scratches an itch in my brain of like just getting deals and like beating the system. Like that's something that I really enjoy, and so I kind of this is a natural fit for me. Other people really don't want to do that, and that's fine. I tell people sometimes that with one or two new credit card signups, you can get enough points to take your family on a trip that maybe you didn't think that you could afford.
Yeah, so this doesn't have to become a whole lifestyle, is what I'm hearing you
Right.
say. It can be just like I want to do this once
And that's
every
really
few
the
years.
best way to do it is to identify a goal. Like I want to I want to figure out how to get enough miles and points to take my family to here. I helped a family, a guy that I used to work with. He had 3 kids, his wife, and so 5 of them, and they wanted to go to Europe. And so we worked and we identified. I think it was 4 credit cards. So two that he signed up for and two that his wife signed up for over like a 6 to 12 month period. And using those miles, we were able to completely cover the cost of the round trip flights for his family to go to Europe and back. His family of 5. That saved him I don't know, 4 or 5 thousand dollars. Then of course in that case he still had expenses, for his hotel and his activities and everything. It wasn't like a free trip to Europe, but it was a free trip to Europe. The actual cost of getting there and back were covered by these credit card signups that he did. So that's the most lucrative way to do it because, like I said earlier, you might get 80,000 or 100,000 miles for signing up for one credit card. When you're only earning like 1 or 2 miles for every dollar that you spend, it's really hard to get a huge amount of miles by just, spending and you're using your everyday spending.
Yes, I want to point out two things. One, I love this idea of having a goal and a plan and where you want to go and all that stuff because, a lot of these people I've heard talk about this say, like, oh, what you really need is the companion pass with Southwest. Like it's one of the best things if you're going to use it, right? Because you get one flight free
Right.
basically for every flight that you purchase. But where I want to go is to visit my parents, and Southwest doesn't fly there.
Sure.
So it's like that'd be a great thing to get, but like that's not helping me because I don't use Southwest to get where I really want to go, right? So having that plan is extremely important, having that goal. And that way you don't end up just because I've heard of some of these people like, oh, I have a million points and I don't know what to do with them, right? They just accumulate almost for the sake of the game of it. And then it's like,
Right.
well, now what? So having that goal, that plan in mind is hugely important. And then something else that I'm just gonna throw out there, and I think that we don't have to talk about it, is uh, the opportunity. Like if you have a business, like a side business, which I recommend for teachers all the time, that has expenses, putting the expenses for your business on these credit cards, and then your clients pay for that expense, pretty much immediately, is a great way to accumulate points. My dad builds houses, which I know no one's doing like a side hustle building houses, but just to give an example, he, buys all the materials on a credit card and then gets paid, net 30 on
Hmm.
his expenses, which is before the grace period for the credit card is over. So he just pays off the credit card. And doing that, my parents hardly ever pay for flights to come visit us because they just accumulate them through my dad's business. So if you can find a business, a side business as a teacher that has those recurring expenses that your clients are paying for, that is a fantastic way to accumulate points as well without having to go and do all the sign up bonus pieces. So we've talked about how cool it is to do the sign up bonuses, go fly. What are the risks? Are there risks associated with doing this?
Sure. I mean, there's risks with everything. I think the number one question that I get all the time when people learn that I do this is, doesn't that trash your credit score? That's literally the number, like the first question from literally almost everybody. And the answer is, if you're doing it right, no, it doesn't. I have a credit score in the 800s, because I pay off my credit cards every month. So if you have the financial ability and dedication to paying off your credit cards, in full each month, it really does not hurt your credit score. I've been doing this for over a decade. Like I said, my credit score has never dipped below, the high 700s. Um, so I think that, and there's also, like, if you know anything about how the credit score formulas work, one of the biggest factors in computing your credit score is called the utilization rate, which basically is how much of your available credit are you using. So if you have one credit card that has a $10,000 limit and you use $1,000 every month, that's what you're spending on it. Your utilization rate is 10% because a thousand out of 10,000. But if I have 10 credit cards that each have a $10,000 rate, but I still only spend $1,000 each month, my utilization rate's only 1%. And so credit card or the credit score companies, look at how much of your available credit are you using, and in the smaller amount of credit that you're using, that's a positive factor in your credit score.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think that that's probably the thing that worries me. Not that I really care, like, is my credit score perfect, but like, I don't want to have a trashy credit score um in case I need it.
Yeah,
Uh
your credit score is one of your most important assets. Just like a house or a car or an investment account, like your credit score is a intangible asset, but it's a real asset.
yeah, so I guess the question that I have about the credit score one, because this is the one that I've always wondered about, is there's like this churn and burn mentality for some people that talk about travel hacking, which is where you open up a card, get the bonus, close the card, get the next one. Like you kind of like cycle through them like that to really like ramp up the points quickly. Um, my understanding is that that would impact your credit score. Is that just you'd say don't do that, or is there a way to do that responsibly, or do those people just not care about the credit score?
Yeah, so I think it's important to understand how that impacts your credit score. So opening up new accounts does give you like a small, we're talking like 3 to 5 point hit to your credit score, like at every new account that you open. I don't recommend that people open a card, get the bonus, and then cancel it right away. I would recommend keeping it for at least a year, but there's plenty of times where I've opened a card that has an annual fee. I'll get the bonus, not really use it that much, and then in 12 months, when the annual fee comes around again, I'll cancel it. I've been doing this, like I said, for over a decade. It doesn't, it hasn't really had any material impact on my credit score. I think another thing to think about, and again, those that 3 to 5 bump is temporary. We're talking, it rolls off after a couple months, and it's one of the smallest factors in creating your actual credit score. What I like, if you're doing all the other things right, you have limited to no debt, you are paying your bills in full every month, opening up a couple of credit cards, even as many as 4 to 5 credit cards a year, like once every couple months, it's not going to make a big impact on your credit score. I've been doing this for over a decade. Both my wife and I have high credit scores. One way to think about it too is, people talk about having a perfect credit score, an 850 credit score. There's really no benefit to having an 850 credit score, like the perfect score. If you have a score in the high 700s, you're going to get the lowest rate for everything, for your mortgage, for your car loan, for your house loan, for whatever. So to me, whether my credit score is 810, or I open a new credit card and it goes down to 805, I don't really see a lot of, negative real world impacts to that. Like I said, I've been doing this over a decade. I've had no negative impacts, um, from opening up tons of credit cards. And again, you don't have to, and you probably shouldn't do what I do. Start small, one or two new credit cards to do a specific trip and, uh, kind of going from there.
So we have the credit score thing off the table. We figured it out. Obviously, if you're going to do this right, you need to pay attention to what cards you're opening because they have like certain rules and things like that. So this is where it can get a little more complicated. But if we're not doing the like intense trying to get the sign-up bonus constantly, like really blow it up, and you're just doing the I have a goal, I'm going to do a few cards, like you don't have to worry about that thing. It's not going to hurt your credit score. But if you're like, I want to do this, is there any time that you would say don't? Slow
I
down,
would
don't do that.
Yeah, so I would recommend, like, if you're about to buy a house, that's probably the only time that I would recommend maybe just pumping the brakes on things because when you're buying a house, they don't just look at your credit score. Like, they have underwriters that will, like, go, through your whole situation. And if you opened up a bunch of credit cards, that could raise a flag. I really don't think that it would cause a problem, but I would probably, encourage you if you're thinking about buying a house in the next, 3 to 5 months, maybe just don't open any new credit cards till you got that squared away. I think another thing is just if you like one of the most important things is that you have the financial ability and discipline to pay off your bills in full each and every month. And so if that's something that you struggle with, this again might not be the right strategy for you. I have a friend, I was talking with him about it and he's like, "Yeah, this would kill me." He's like, "I'm the type of person that the credit card companies want to have credit cards, because he knows that he's just, not disciplined enough to kind of to keep track of everything, and so that, again, you kind of know yourself there. If you have credit card debt, I would recommend focusing on paying that down first. When you're paying 18 to 25% in interest, earning 1 to 2% back in rewards is really not something that it pales in comparison to the amount of interest that you could save if you paid down your credit card debt first.
Yeah, and I would expand that to, other forms of debt as well, unless it's like a really low debt. But like
Yeah.
if you are in a significant amount of debt, um, this might not be the time to be, focusing on getting these points. Credit card debt specifically, of course. But as long as you're paying your bills every single month and you're able to pay towards the other debt, that's okay. But don't just focus entirely on this if your other debt is not being properly crushed, because that that interest rate can just really eat away at any benefit you can get from this. Which brings me kind of to another point on here that does this tend to lead to overspending? Like, if I did this and I'm going on these trips, things like that, am I going to spend more money because even though I got the trip for free, I'm spending on those other things? Like, is it really worth it if I'm going to go overspend, or have you not seen that?
Yeah, I mean, right. I could definitely see people with a mindset of, oh, well, I got my flights and my hotels all for free. So now I can just spend tons of money on everything else, right? Because, like, oh, it's free. And I think there's no real good way to answer that for everybody because everybody's going to be different. Like, I know for myself, I'm a cheapskate. And so, pardon me, frugal. I prefer frugal as the adjective, right? So that's not a problem for me. But I think it could be, a problem for some people, and you kind of just have to know yourself. What is your relationship with money? What like do you have a budget? It's hard. I was in Florida a week or two ago with my wife, and we were kind of talking about we were down in Key West in like a very touristy part, and we were just kind of talking about how difficult it is to to set a budget for travel because a lot of people when they go on vacation, they're on vacation, so they're eating out every meal. They're going into all like the touristy souvenir shops and buying, all the overpriced tourist stuff. And it can be difficult to set a budget for that, and so it really just depends on your personality, she and I, we are kind of similar in the fact that we don't like to spend money on things that aren't important to us, so we were just walking up and down Duval Street, just kind of looking at, at things. We went to the cemetery because apparently the Key West Cemetery has a lot of really unique epitaphs. There was one from the town hypochondriac, and her on her gravestone it said, "I told you I was sick." So it has like a it has like a bunch of stuff like that. Free stuff to do that's fun. And it just kind of depends on your personality and kind of what you do, and it is something to watch out for, I think.
Yeah, okay, I love that because it just helps us realize that this is not an excuse to go spend a ton, right? You
Yeah,
you want to get the same experience you would have done if you saved up for the whole trip, and not just go blow it somewhere else, because that's what keeps you in check. Now, uh, a teacher listening to this might be have a couple of concerns, which is they don't make very much money. So like, can I use this and really like enjoy it because of the bonus requirements, things like that? Like they might be concerned about meeting those requirements, or just I'm only going to get to travel
right.
every so often. I don't get to travel constantly. And then the other concern is it's great that teachers have time off, but when we have time off, when everybody else wants to
Yeah.
be traveling, so it's like peak travel season, and that makes it kind of difficult. Does that kind of negate any of the benefits of this, or how can the teacher think about those
Yeah, I
problems?
mean those are great points that are very specific to teachers, right? When you travel, like June, July, and August, you and everybody else in the free world are, going to the beach, right? So it does make it a little bit complicated in that respect. I think for both of those situations, it really goes back to what we were talking about earlier about coming up with a plan. Saying, okay, well, this is the trip that I want to take. And so maybe it is something where you are, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna go like right when school goes out, before like peak some season, season, or having a plan for where you want to go, when you want to go. At the end of the day, if you only want to go where everybody wants to go, when everybody wants to go there, it's going to be expensive, right? There's not a whole lot that you can do about this. Using some of these credit card points can help with that, and maybe make it a little bit more manageable. I think that it's still a completely viable strategy. It's going to save you money. Maybe you're still going to have to spend some money if you are um, traveling during those peak times to those peak places. But I think that's why having a plan first, like, okay, well, these are the places that I want to go. Let me do some research. Like, okay, well, this one's going to be really expensive when I want to go. This one maybe is a little bit better. Okay, I'm going to plan to go to instead of going to, Hilton Head or Myrtle Beach, I'm going to go up the coast a little bit to somewhere that's a little bit less popular. Or I'm going to go, in a less popular time. I'm not going to go over July 4th weekend. I'm going to go, some other time during the summer when I have off. And then, okay, well, now I know where I want to go. Okay, what hotel do I want to stay at? How can I get their card so I can get a bunch of points? Or what airline might I fly there? Or maybe I'm going to drive there. So having that plan, like, really helps. A lot of times I get people that are like, "Hey, I want to go to Disney World over spring break, and it's like in 2 months. Like, how can this help me?" I'm like, "You're really not. You can't. Like the way that it works best is planning, 6 to 12 to 18 months out. Thinking, okay, this is what I want to do. These are the cards that give me the points that can help me do that."
Yeah, because I mean, at a minimum, I think 3 months is the shortest bonus time frame I've seen on a credit card. And usually it's like you spend in 3 months and then like on the next, billing cycle, like it takes
Right,
time for these
right,
points to accrue. So definitely, planning in advance, making sure that you are not just saying, I'm going to go tomorrow, right? That's
right.
a huge thing. So that plan, that research, this takes time. I like to point out that this is a hobby that's going to take your time, that's going to allow you to travel more because that's another hobby that you love. But the credit card points thing itself is a bit of a hobby because you have to spend the time, planning and researching and preparing beforehand. You can't just shoot from the hip on this if you want to do it well.
I would definitely agree.
Okay, so let's say somebody's like, you know what, I do love traveling and I want to get started. What do you think is, a good first step? And what are some mistakes that someone might make when they're just starting out?
Yeah, so I think the biggest mistake maybe is like in your prep work of like, oh, I still have a lot of credit card debt, or I don't have the rest of my finances in order first. I think that's a big mistake. Making sure I'm sure that you have a lot of other podcasts, and information about like how to just, get your overall finances in play, set up a budget, pay down your debt, those kind of things. Those are the things that you need to do first. Um, as far as in the travel hacking space, like mistakes that you can make, one mistake is um, you not paying attention to when your time frame is to hit this sign up bonus. A lot of the sign up bonuses are structured like 80,000 miles if you spend $3,000 in the first 3 months of having your card, something like that. Not paying attention to when those 3 months are up and making sure that you paid your $3,000 so that you can get the big bonus that you applied for. That's one that I've done, where I just screwed it up and I just didn't get the bonus. Um, the other one maybe is depending on how long you're doing this is not paying attention to what cards you have and just continuing to pay annual fees long after you've stopped. You took the trip, you stopped using the card now, but you never get around to canceling it, so you're still paying $99 every year, and uh, not canceling that if it's no longer providing value to you. Those are some of the mistakes. I think as far as first steps go, it's the plan, right? Identify a particular trip. The more specific that you can be, the better. Ideally one that is, a year out. So we're, if it's February 2026 right now, maybe it's for summer of 2027, right? Like, okay, in summer of 2027, I want to, whatever, go to the beach, go to Disney World, go to Europe, okay, that's a plan. Then you kind of walk backward from that, like, okay, let's do some research. How am I going to get there? Am I going to fly? Where do I want to stay? And then kind of backing that up into, okay, well, what cards can help me to do that? And then kind of backing up into a plan. I think that's the first steps.
Yeah, I love those. Those are great first steps. So this has been pretty much an introduction into travel hacking. You can get really far down into the weeds if that's what you want to do, and especially if you want to do it with a crew. Dan, where can someone get in contact with you if they have a question about travel hacking?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to help anybody for free. If you want to send me an email of, that kind of gives your situation, what trip you want to take, and kind of what you're thinking. I'm happy to provide a few suggestions as far as credit cards. You can reach me at dan@pointswithacrew.com. That's the best way to get a hold of me, and I'm happy to help.
Awesome. Dan, thank you for coming on the show today. I have a final question I ask all of my guests. What is your number one tip for teachers to have a richer wallet, classroom, and life?
Yeah, that's a great one. I think my number one tip, has to be just to get organized on your finances, just in your life, right? I know that that's really hard for people. I have a couple kids, that have ADHD that really struggle with some of this, sensory or not sensory processing, executive function stuff. And so if that's, something, that there may not be as much that you can do with that, but being organized, paying attention to your finances, paying attention to how your money's coming in, where it's going out, that's my number one tip.
I love it. Get organized. It's fantastic. It applies to your money, your life, everything.
Exactly.
Organization just makes things run better, run more smoothly
Right.
in
I'm a
general.
family of eight, right? So people like if I wasn't organized, I would go crazy. And I don't know. I see people that, are not organized and I wonder how they work. They probably think the same thing about me. But, I think that just paying attention to that kind of stuff can really make a big impact.
Awesome. Well, Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate
Thanks
your
for
time
having
today.
me. Yep, thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Wow. Wasn't that a great episode? Thank you, Dan, so much for coming on the show. Now it's time for my cliff notes, my top takeaways for this episode. Number one, points can equate money, but they don't always. So finding a way to pull them away from money actually is better because sometimes you can make them worth more than they would be if it's just a strict one-to-one relationship. Number two, sign-up bonuses are the intense version if you want to scale it up, right? But if you are just wanting to, start getting a little bit, you can just maybe get one sign-up bonus and then start accruing points. You don't have to do the whole like get a whole bunch of sign-up bonuses one after the other, and then tracking cards and all that stuff. That is not necessary if that's not what you want to do. Number three, this doesn't have to be a lifestyle. It does not have to be an intense hobby. It can just be identifying a goal and working towards that goal and accruing the points that will get you that correct airline, the correct hotel, etc., to get where you want to go. Number four, it doesn't have to trash your credit score if you do it right. Just pay off your cards every single time and don't open too many all at once, and make sure you close them down at a reasonable time and not immediately. Within within a year if there's an annual fee, or after that year mark if there is not an annual fee. Number five, when not to do this would be if you're trying to buy a house in the near future, you don't have financial discipline, or you're in credit card debt. I think those three things are good cautions, just so people don't think this is 100% always a good idea. Number six, set a budget for travel. He didn't really say this out, but I love this point of you don't want to use these points to save money to then go blow it somewhere else, right? You want to be able to enjoy your travel for less. That's the frugal mentality. So set a budget, say I'm going to spend this much on the other stuff and not use the money I would have used for, flights just because I didn't use it on flights. That is a huge way to keep your expenses low and have the same experience, which is what we're shooting for with frugality. Number seven, plan, research. I'm going to include his final point, get organized. All that stuff is hugely important in travel, hacking, but in other things too. If you have a plan, if you have organization, if you've researched in advance, you're going to be successful. If you don't, you're going to crash and burn. That is a huge thing to pay attention to and get your life in order before you start doing this. And then number eight, pay attention to annual fees, sign-up bonuses, and timeframes, so that way you aren't getting burned by this. Trying to open up a credit card and then not meeting the bonus, not very fun. Opening up the card, forgetting about it with the annual fee of $99 or whatever, is just going to wreck the benefit of having that card over time. So make sure that you pay attention to those things so that way you can do this right. If you enjoyed this episode, send me an email, Shaun, SHAUN, at teachermoneyshow.com. Tell me about it if you have some comments. I'd love to hear more from my audience. I want to know what you guys want to know about, and if you are enjoying the episodes that I am putting out. But remember, regardless of what we talk about here, as a teacher, you are already rich. Your wallet just needs to catch up. If you would like help on your personal financial situation, go to teachermoneyshow.com/coaching, and you'll be able to find different ways I can help you there. If you would like to participate in spreading this message of financial empowerment to teachers, I would encourage you to talk to your administrator or to your district level about going to SeanKMorgan.com to find more information there. And regardless of which one of those you need, please like and subscribe so that way we can spread the reach of this more. Leave a 5-star rating and review. That's going to help more teachers find this, and then turn around and tell a teacher friend. I really appreciate it.
Contents of this podcast are informational in nature and are not legal or tax advice, and neither I nor my guests are engaged in the provision of legal, tax, or any other advice. You should not act upon this information without first seeking appropriate advice from an accountant, financial planner, lawyer, or other professional.